Okay, we are in week 2. This is the part 2 of week 2. So we're looking at adding the columns and the beams this time so we can form our structure. Now the first part of this video, I'll split this into 2 bits. The first bit is going to be a little bit about columns and a little bit about beams and how they work. And then the second bit is going to be a simple little walkthrough of the homework task. Okay, so this is what we're up against. We've got our grid. This should have been done by now. So you've got your grid lines in, and we've renamed these A, B, C, D, E, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 across the bottom. We should also now have repositioned our elevation markers so they're outside of this zone. And also if we click on the little beak bit, we should see our camera line there and our far clip offset kind of sitting over the bubble of the other ones. I'll just drag those down just a little bit. They're well outside the sort of the boundary of the building, but it won't harm just to complete that. So this one as well. Okay, so now we're set to go. The other thing that we should by now have done, if I go into the default 3D view, then we've got our levels. And what I've also done is renamed them 01 ground floor, 02 first floor, 03 second, and 04 roof. The site is the site, so that's slightly different than the rest of them. I will be explaining the sort of the way in which we can see things further down the line. But for now, we just need to put a few columns into our structure. So we can't work in 3D. Well, we can work in 3D, but it's not the optimum way of doing it. What we have to try to remember, however, is that there is a grid which we can't see. We can only see the levels, unfortunately. But there is a grid sort of working along here which fills this sort of box. So we've got a 3D box here. If I turn on this thing, section box, then it's going to show us the scope of that zone. Okay, so this little button here, section box. What you can do with the section box is also sort of cut through buildings in 3D. And then you can also right click and hide the section box, hide in view. So you just see sort of a 3D cutaway of the model. So it's quite a useful thing to do. For now, however, we're going to uncheck the section box. So we don't want to see that. But that will be coming in handy later on. So just as you can imagine, we've got this zone in the middle where we're going to be building. So I'm going back to the ground floor. And I'm going to go over to the structure tab. Now there is a column option on the architecture tab, but I'll just show us what the structure tab has to offer. But you can see there's 2 types of column. There's a structural column and there's a architectural column. The structural column has structural integrity, has sort of load bearing capacity, whereas the architectural column is just a pretty little thing that you sit around a structural column to make it look a little bit more architectural, I guess. Okay, but there's nothing wrong with architectural structure. It's just that in Revit, an architectural column doesn't have any structure. It just sort of encases a structural element. So if I just click on structural column, oh, sorry, I was going to go for the structure tab. So let's flick over to the structure tab. Then we can see all things structural. We've also got a steel tab, which looks at different types of steel and cutaway. So this is quite useful if you're interested in this. The civil engineers or the structural engineers might want to explore this a little bit more in detail. But this is what we're looking at the moment, the structure tab. So we've got a beam and we've got a column. We've got a structural wall. We've got bracing, we've got truss systems, we've got beam systems, we've got all sorts of things. And then what you also see on some of these panels, not all of them, but some of them, we see these little arrows. Okay, so I'll just click on one of those arrows and it takes us to the settings for this little panel. So here it is, finally. These are structural connections. Okay, all sorts of different types. So we can add in to this sort of loaded connection here. So when you create sort of links and connections for structural calculations, then these things will be visible. Okay, so I'll just cancel that out. We'll look at the structural settings. This should load up much more quickly than that, because that was loading up a load of sort of 3D elements. This is how you would define structure load cases. So we've got these dead and live loads. They're not called loads anymore. They're active and static, I think. And we can create sort of load combinations. Okay, so you can put a live load of such and such on and a dead load of such and such on, and then you can export this out to something like robot structure analysis, and that will give you some structure and some maths to go with it. Okay, so nothing that we'll be doing in this module, but for those of you who are interested in taking it further, you can do all of that stuff inside the software. So let's go back to columns. Let's look at the column. I'm clicking on the column and we get this green context ribbon. Again, remember the color is important. We've got a vertical column, a slanted column option, which isn't checked at the moment. It's highlighting the vertical column option. Then we've got these positions here, okay, at grids or at the architectural column. And then we've got this tag on placement, which we'll ignore for the moment. That would put the name or type of the column or beam when we position it. We can tag later, something that we might not ever get to in this course, but there is an option for doing that as well. So vertical columns are basically going to go from one level to another. And the first thing you have to bear in mind is that when we put a column in Revit, its first sort of option, the default option, is to go downwards, not up. But if we were to put a column on these grid lines, we wouldn't be able to see it because it would be sitting below the surface of this level. Okay, so we'd see it in 3D, but we wouldn't see it in 2D because there are view settings that do not allow us at the moment, until we change them, to view things beyond the sort of the level 0 that we're in. So we're going to go height, and we've got an unconnected height. So this is similar to what we found with the walls, but we could go up to maybe the first floor. And then that's going to just grey out, ignore that. So our columns, we can now see, I'll just zoom in on the screen later on, how we can see a little I-beam, because we've got this universal column, or it's a UC, I beg your pardon, 305 by 305 by 97. The 97, by the way, is the weight in kilograms per linear meter. Okay, the 305 by 305 are the sort of approximate sizes of the width and the height. They're not exact sizes, they'll be slightly different than that. And then this is the weight per linear meter. So I can now come and click. I'm not putting them at grids at the moment, I'm not selecting the grids, but I could just click at these intersections. And also, if I just tap the space bar as I'm putting these in, then I can orientate the column position. So I'll just put one like that and another one like that. So we've now got 4 columns in our model. Okay, there's another method for placement, and that's via the grid. So if I go to the column tool again, I'm sticking with vertical columns, but this time I'm going to position them at the grid intersections because I've set up the grid. So to make sure that I'm not sort of misplacing them, I can just click this button at grids. And then if I sort of grab around these grid lines, I won't go to the sort of top section because I've already got them there. If I let go at this point, then we can see, if I zoom in, we can see that we've now got columns positioned at the intersections of each grid, which might have meant that by positioning the columns, I'll just come over here, we might not have got that intersecting point, but we're guaranteed that we're going to hit this column at the intersecting point. Now, these aren't rotated in any specific order, they're just vertical, but if I wanted to turn them, I'd have to do that after I'd finished placing them. And this sort of feature where we get the green tick and the red cross happens quite a lot in this software. So just by placing them, you might then think that you're all done. And you might go to the Architecture tab and you think, right, okay, it's time now to do something else. And you click away and your columns disappear because this thing hasn't been checked. So now I've got to go back to my structure. In fact, I've got to cross this out because I need to start again. And I go back to the Structure tab and columns. I'm going to click on the column. I've still got the column attached to my cursor. I'm going to make sure I click on this one, at grids. And then I'm going to click and drag up around these. So I see the columns positioned, and then I'm going to green tick it. Okay, and then I'm going to hit escape a couple of times just to get rid of that column on the cursor. And now we can have a look. The only one that the section we haven't put one in is here. So I'm now going back to my 3D view. In fact, I use the tab here. And we can see the columns. Okay, so they've just gone in from, if I go into a left view, now we can see now in 3D, I can see that the columns have gone from this level up to this level. Okay, that's a really useful thing to see. There's this grid in the 3D. Last version of it, we couldn't see it, but now we can. So I'm just sort of orbiting around. I've got my finger on the shift key and I've got another finger on the wheel of the mouse pressing down. That allows me to do that sort of orbiting thing, which I probably should have mentioned earlier on, but I'm mentioning it now. So hopefully you've worked that out yourself. So there's only one more position and that's this one. And I don't think that we could put it in 3D. I haven't tried this, but I'll give it a go. Right click, create similar. So that's that column. Can I link the two together? Yes, I can. So you could put these in 3D, but it's not really something that I would recommend because it might be slightly off. Okay, I'm going to go back to my ground floor and let's just check it looks like it's in the right sort of position. Now, if I wanted to rotate any of these, then I can click on it and use my spacebar and just tap around and that's going to reposition it. Okay, so now we've got a series of columns on the grid, so occupying 25 places. What we need to do in reality is get rid of 5 of these because I've asked for only 20 columns. And I've also asked for a core of 3x3. So something like that. Now, if I want a core and I want a sort of a concrete type of core, because a core is a sort of structural form within sort of a high-rise building. You can hang things off of it. You can usually protect things like stairways, fire escapes, lift shafts within this sort of concrete fire protected zone. So we are going to put in a concrete core onto this. And to do that, we need to change the steel columns into concrete ones. Okay, now there's no option. If I click on this column, there's no option here to pick a concrete column. We've only got the universal column 305 by 305 by 97. Okay, so I need to load up some extra columns. If I was to put the column in again, then we've got this option to load family. We can either do it there or we can do it on the Insert tab. We've got load family there. But I'll do it sort of as part of the process for inserting these columns. And I'll click on load family. And this brings up the family file structure within the software. It knows where to look because it's already preset. But it doesn't mean to say that it's the only place you can look. You could have other file locations. So it's just a file browser. It's in Program Data, Autodesk, RVT 2019, Libraries in UK. And then we can come down to structural columns. There is a columns option. So you might be looking there, but that's architectural columns. We want to come down to structural columns. Double click, and then we go concrete. Double click that. And then we've only got a few in here. We've got concrete rectangular, concrete round, concrete square. We've got the column with a drop cap at the top. We've got this one as well, but we'll pick a square one, I guess. You could choose a rectangular one, but square. is what we'll need. And I'm going to say open. Now I've got this square column and I don't want to place it because I've already got columns positioned in these spaces. What I am going to do is swap this out later on, but I'm going to hit escape because all I want to do is load that column in. And now if I click on this, I've got options for concrete square columns as well. Okay, so I didn't put them in sort of as I went along. I'm going to put them in after the fact. So now I'm going to select this 9 this time. So this is going to be my core in this position, not the corner. And I'm just going to click on this and I'm going to choose, I don't know, 450 by 450. And that then swaps this lot out for 450 by 450. All it does is changes the profile. If we look into 3D, then it hasn't changed the height or anything else. All the other properties are the same. And that is a feature of this software. When you swap one family for another, what tends to happen is its sort of parameters, where it's based and where it goes to, how it's designed, they normally stay the same. And all that changes is kind of a profile. And if I was to dig right down into this, then ultimately this is an extruded rectangle with material properties, and this is an extruded eye section with certain material properties. Okay, we'll be looking at those further down the road, but for now all you need to know is you've got a series of steel columns and you've got a series of concrete columns, and they're going from ground floor to first floor. Okay, it's time now to add the beams. So I'm going to go back to my ground floor, and we've got our column positions, so we can see them here, and we've got the concrete columns. I'm going to leave it up to you to decide which of the columns you get rid of, because we only want 20 column positions in total. You've got 9 here to start with. You could in fact get rid of this one if you wanted, the center of it. I think we don't necessarily need to have that there. We could build a concrete wall kind of around here and that would be sufficient, but leave it in if you want, and then choose which ones you want to get rid of. I'll leave mine as they are for the moment because I just want to show you how to put in a beam. So on the structure tab, we've got this thing here called beam. And I think the beam is pretty much the same as a column in so much as we only have one. And the slight difference between universal beams and universal columns is that a universal column will usually have the same size, 305 by 305, so they're kind of square-ish, even though they're I-beams, square in section. But the universal column will have a greater depth than width. So you've got the top and the bottom plate and then the sort of flange in the middle, and that can often have holes of various shapes cut into it, so you can allow cables to come through or pipes or whatever. So putting a beam in. So we've got this grid option again, but I'll put one in just freestyle as it were. And we've got this thing here, placement plane, level 0 ground. Now we don't want to put it on the ground. We need to put this on the first floor. Okay, so what we're now going to do is position a beam on the floor above our cut plane. So I'm going to click, I'm going to zoom in, click at this point, and I'm going to come to this point here and click there. And we get a warning saying none of the created elements are visible in the floor plan. It's because when we've created this beam, it's above our heads and we can't see it. So I'm just going to say, okay, it doesn't tell us that it's not there. It just says that we can't actually see it due to the constraints of the view. If I go into 3D, then we can see that the beam is in fact there. And if I go into a side view, I'll try another one, try this one. So we can now see what's happening. This beam, even though it's within the primary range, and I'll explain that in a second with the view range tool, we can't see it because it is above a cut plane which is set at 1500 mil. So it is a bit confusing, all of this stuff. Okay, there are apparently 33 different reasons or thereabouts why you might not be able to see something in this software. So that's an awful lot of things that could potentially make you decide that you've had enough with the software and sort of just shut it down, kick it out, throw your computer out the window. All of those things I have considered in the past when I've been using this software. It can be frustrating, and please don't get frustrated. Please just give us a shout and I can sort you out. I've been using this software for quite some time, so I would imagine that anything sort of you get yourself into a pickle with, I should be able to resolve relatively easily. So this thing called view range, if I click away from this view, and I have to go into a floor plan, in fact, there you go, floor plan, and now under the extents section, I'll click on edit view range, and then we can see what's going on. There's also a little descriptive image, which sometimes helps, sometimes doesn't. And I'm going to zoom my screen into this in a second so we can kind of have a better look at what's going on. But we've got 7 different values here. One is the top of the primary range, this thing here. This is the bottom of the primary range, and this is the cut line for the primary range. Now, currently the cut plane is set at 1500. We can't change that. That is associated with this floor plan. What we can do, however, is adjust the top and bottom of the primary range. So we can look, we cannot look necessarily, but we can have a scope box which goes higher or lower than the floor range. Okay, then we got the view depth, which is a zone below the associated level. Now currently the view depth is the same as the bottom of the primary range. If I wanted to extend below the bottom of the primary range, I'd have to give a negative value to this or set it to a level that was below the ground line, but we haven't got a level below ground level, so I couldn't do that. But I could extend what I can see looking down by giving it a negative value here. Don't worry that you don't get all this. That's fine. I just need to explain this to you just in case you are curious as to why you can and can't see things and you want to explore it yourself. If you don't, then that's fine. But you have to bear in mind that this is the way the software works, and so you do need sort of to be aware of it, even if you don't understand it fully. So there are also caveats as to certain things that are visible above the cut plane and certain things that won't be visible above your head, and certain line conditions that apply to certain things above your head, all these sorts of things. That's why this primary range sort of issue, or the view range, can be really, really confusing. Okay, so I've covered that. You can ignore it at your sort of peril, but you do need to know it's there. What this means is that even though our beam is sitting at the top of our primary range, our cut plane is set below it, and the beam isn't something that is visible above the cut plane. Okay, so it's simple as that. So I'm just going to say OK to that, and we'll just accept the fact that we can't see the beam which is coming in there for a second, and then we're going to put in some more based on a different method. So again, beam, and on grids this time, and I've still only got that one type, but I'll come and just grab all the grid lines, or this many at least, and I'll pick this as well. Can I add? No, I need to do that first, and then I need to put my finger on the control key to get the add selection. So you can see the plus sign on the cursor, that's the control key, and I can come this far. That should give me enough positions. Okay, now I can say finish. I don't want this one because I've already got one there, but it might tell me that there's one already there as well. And I'm going to say finish. And I'm going to say yes, there are identical instances at the same place. That means I've added one to this bit, or I've got my floor plan orientation incorrect. I'll then hit escape a couple of times. I'm now going to go back into 3D view, and now I can see my 3D model, and it's possibly going to be this one. There you go. I selected and hit delete, and now I've got the beams and the columns all line through. Okay, so it's looking good so far. However, I want some concrete beams for my core. So this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, the others as well. These need to be concrete. So what do? I'll go to the Insert tab this time, and I'm going to load family. And we back to concrete. This is the columns. So I'm just going to go back to my UK. And this time we need to look at structural framing. For some reason, it's not a structural beam, it's structural framing. So double click structural framing and go to concrete. And let's go for a rectangular beam. And let's say open. So this then loads in a rectangular beam. And if I click on this to start off with, and I hit my drop down here, I've got a 300 by 600 or a 400 by 800. So what happens if I want a 400 wide by 600 deep concrete beam? I'm going to have to set it first. Okay, I'll just click on 300 by 600 so I can change that to 300 by 600. And then I can select it again and I can click on edit type. And I can click then on duplicate because I don't want to override the parameters for this one. I've got two types currently, 300 by 6, 4 by 8. And I'm going to click on duplicate. And I'm just going to change the name of it to 400 by 600. I'll get rid of the 2. I'll say OK to that. So now it's called 400 by 600. I just need to change the B value for breadth to 400. Not the dollar sign. There you go, 400. Okay, and then I will say OK to that. That then changes this to a 400 by 600. And now I can use, under my modify panel, I've got this thing here, match properties. This is really useful. Click on that. I can click this one. Then I can paste the properties onto the other beams that make up my core. And then this one as well. Now if I didn't have this, then I might want a bigger beam coming across here. And that would be fine. So if I got rid of this, so delete, then I could select this and pull that to there and get rid of this and pull this through to that intersection as well. Okay, so now these are much longer, but these would probably need to be deeper because they haven't got support in the middle. So then I could select this and change this to 400 by 800 possibly. And notice the way it extends downwards, not upwards, because the reference plane for these beams is sitting at the floor plane. Okay, that doesn't change with the beams. So when you increase the depth of a beam, it comes down, doesn't go up. So I'm just going to close that. And now with this selected, I can click match properties and I'll just copy that to that. Okay, so as far as I am concerned, that is covering these things to the level in which we need to know them. So hopefully you've got a better insight into the way in which the software works and how we can position these things: steel beams, concrete beams, and concrete and steel columns. Okay, the next short video, it's not going to be very long. I'm just going to go through the process of adding these columns and beams again, but sort of in real time. I'll just give a little commentary as I go through, so you get a sense of really how quickly ultimately you'll be able to do these things. Okay, but I appreciate at the start then you'll be spending a little bit more time learning and getting your head around the software, but just sort of follow your instincts with it and follow the rules. It's more important that you try to understand what's actually happening behind the scenes as far as the software goes, rather than concentrating on sort of the design of this. Okay, make as many mistakes as you want, and then just try it again and again until it becomes a little bit easier for you to grasp. Okay, so the final bits will be sort of the homework bit, and then there'll be a little quiz on Top Hat just to finish off this week.